Hello everyone, this is Sandeep and welcome to our second episode of Trick or Threat with ScyberX. In this episode, we'll cover the consumer side of security. So this video is for people who are less tech savvy but use technology in their day-to-day lives for online shopping, online banking, sharing videos and pictures with their family and friends. Like my mom, she recently discovered the joys of online shopping. So mom, this video is for you as well. So today we are in conversation with Cyber Protect Officer, advisor to the Thames Valley Police Cybercrime Unit, who also provides support and guidance to the local policing area, ensuring they have the necessary cybersecurity skills to deal with emerging cyber crimes. So please welcome our second guest, Mark Gosland. Hi Mark, how are you?
Hello, very good. Thank you, Sanjeev. How's things with you?
Pretty good, thank you. So first of all, I want to say thank you for joining us today.
You're
I
welcome.
know you're a busy man, so really appreciate your time.
Okay.
I do have some questions for you, but before that, if you can tell us a little bit more about yourself, that'll be great.
Okay, sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Godsland. You can see from the slide, I'm a Mr., not a PC. I'm not a warranted officer, a member of what's called police staff. I work for Thames Valley Police. I'm one of two cyber protect officers, but from the public's point of view, we call them police cybersecurity advisors. My job is to advise both the police themselves in terms of staff training, raising awareness for the community support officers, neighbourhood watch, etc. Information about how to protect themselves from cybercrime and some elements of fraud. But I also work with the communities, not with schools, because that's dealt with by our schools officers. And my job is across the whole of the community is trying to give information out to help people become more aware about what they need to be doing about their online safety, how to reduce the elements of threat, risk and harm to them as individuals, but also to businesses as well, and also to the older community. I've been in post for about 2.5 years, and I was in post doing the same job when I worked with Gloucestershire Police up until 2016. As I said, I work for Thames Valley Police. I'm one of around about 50 cyber protect officers across a wider network of protect officers. We are all now embedded in each of the force areas. I work within a cybercrime team, which is fronted up by a detective inspector and detective sergeant, and we have 5 detective constables who are the investigators, and their main role is to investigate crime that's allocated them in terms of dependent crime, and that's computer on computer. And my job is also to deal with some victims who are victims of dependent crime. Sometimes I work with cyber-enabled crime, which is basically any crime on the statute book that can be leveraged to some form of digital device. And the one sort of element I'd like to sort of share now is, please, if I looked at 10 crimes a week, 9 at least would be account takeovers. Now that's whereby the victim unfortunately hasn't had a strong password, or they haven't had a password at all. I'm talking about Gmail accounts, Hotmail, but also their social media accounts. And in addition to that, they've set up no two-factor authentication. So had they done that strong password and set up 2FA, the chances are they would have been a victim of an account takeover and all the grief that goes with that. So that's a sort of brief introduction who I am and what I do and why we do it.
As you know, consumers are spending more time online than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, how can they stay safe and protected?
Obviously, COVID-19 is on everybody's radar. And as such, we are, through the National Crime Agency, focusing on the 4 key areas there, which is ransomware, phishing, home working, which you just asked me about, and wider online crime. And from that, the National Cybersecurity Centre puts out lots of information about that. So the next slide is going to go on looking at consumers. You mentioned about online now, what do people do? These are the 4 sort of basic takeaways that people need to think about when they're shopping online or trading online. Obviously, it's slightly different to the trading, but it is about where you shop. Do you trust the seller? So, for example, if you go on eBay and you click on a link, are you confident that link will take you to a legitimate site? Or if you've been given a website that as a recommendation from a friend, do you go to that? Do you do any due diligence? So if you do shop online and you're a regular person doing that, most people know the way around that now, and they know the trusted sites. But equally, they've got to know where they're going to shop and what they're going to do. So just think about it first. Then email accounts, where we spoke about it earlier on, you have to have an email account to trade, but the problem is your email is a gateway to your life. And if your email account isn't secure with a good strong password and two-factor authentication, you could leave yourself wide open and people have access to that. And that's why we get these reports of accounts being taken over. And then you've got the phishing element. So you maybe have transacted with somebody, but you weren't maybe transacting with a legitimate site. What could happen is you could get emails coming into, or text messages, or even phone calls asking you to do certain things. Now, you should be asking yourself the question, am I expecting that? Who's this from? Do I trust it? So unfortunately, people just click on links without thinking about it. And then that in itself opens up another can of worms, because it could enable some malware to be enabled onto their device, or takes them onto another site where their credit card details could be harvested, etc., and used against them. Then we go into the realms of possibility of fraud, identity theft, takeover, etc. And then finally, the payment method. How are you going to pay? Are you going to pay by good old-fashioned cash? Is it bank transfer? We wouldn't advise bank transfers. Always shop, as Martin Lewis says, using your credit card. Why? Because there are protections in that. So it's just raising the awareness of people what they need to be doing, and start thinking about a process, but also signposting people to where to go on to get help.
So my second question is, how can consumers detect and report a threat? And how are these reports of cybercrime handled?
Okay, let's go back to a previous slide. Okay, how can people detect a threat? If they have antivirus on their device, and if they run a regular sweep, that will pick that up. And everybody has antivirus on their devices. But really, it's the fundamental thing is about them as the human firewall to do basic things, such as making sure their devices are secure with a PIN. Don't click on links, etc., as we spoke about in the early introduction. But also recognizing the signs of a scam and what is blatantly a scam, and not to deal with that. Some more fundamental things is if they receive a message and they don't really give it due diligence and they click on the link, that will enable ransomware. And so clearly, if things go wrong, people need to know where to report. So we spoke about early on about reporting, but I've brought up the slide again. Action Fraud has been up and running for many years now, and it had a revamp about a year ago, and it's a far better system than it was before. The fundamental thing is that we do need people to report fraud and cybercrime to the police, because without the statistics to say what's been reported, different types of crime, we can't invest time, money, effort into the future trying to help prevent these. But police forces work at a far wider area than they ever done before. We work with National Crime Agency, National Cybersecurity Centre. We work across regions now, different types of force areas. So reporting is crucial to what we do. And again, on the slide, it shows where people can report crime. What will happen is they will go online, or they'll make their phone call in. They'll be asked to register, especially if it's online. After that, then they go through a script, which they've been asked to give information. And again, it's a plea for me at this point now that if you do become a victim and you do report crime, do please give as much information as possible, because I do see some of the crime reports that come in, and there is scant or very little information that I is giving advice, looking at the advice point of view. I can't really give much advice because I don't really know what's going on apart from the very small bit of information they provided, and it makes it even worse for investigators because there's very little evidence. So please put in as much information as possible. you will get what's called an NFRC number, which is a number for that incident. That will eventually be sent over to the forces. The forces will look at that. They will then go through that and crime it. Action fraud do not investigate crime. That's down to the forces to do. Now, unfortunately, some of the information when people report crimes to the police, there's insufficient evidence or information for us to make any further follow-up and take it further. But where there is that information and evidence, then the cybercrime team, if they're allocated to do that, they will do that, and there will be an outcome, and we will contact the people back. Sometimes when I contact a victim of crime, I'll say that it's been through that process, but until further information comes to light, and indeed I spoke to a victim of crime yesterday because they had very complex circumstances. From that, she alluded to other information that she didn't put in the original crime report to Action Fraud. So from that, I've now got a little bit of information. I've gone back to the officer in the case, who's the DC, Detective Constable on my team, and he's now going to make follow-up inquiries because we now have leads by which we can follow up. So hopefully that sort of preamble will highlight to people why it's important to report things, that the quality information they give us is critical to make enabling us to go forward and make an investigation. And if we're not able to make an investigation, why, but also that they will get the advice to help reduce that opportunity in the future of them becoming a victim again.
Okay, Mark. So what are your top 5 cybersecurity tips for our viewers to stay safe and fraud-free?
Okay, great. And it's a good question to ask. So to your listeners, they will see a slide there. At the top left-hand side, it says @CyberAware. Now, CyberAware is a revamped government initiative working through the National Cybersecurity Centre, and it's specifically there to advise the members of the public. Now, there are many areas that people could look at to help reduce online threats to themselves and their families. These are the 6 areas that the CyberAware campaign is focusing on, at least for the next year. And the premise is about raising people's awareness, but fundamentally to get them to have a change of behaviour, because there's really no point if we just raise people's awareness and they continue to have the same habits as they had in the past, because they unfortunately will be victims at some stage in the future. And these are very fundamental, and they are deliberately at a low base denominator because it has to be easy for everybody to understand. Now, some of your viewers might be saying, I know all that. That's really good. Then if they know that, then they can go to the National Cybersecurity website and they can go to the other elements of advice for individuals. But we'll focus on these 6 areas here. So the fundamental thing is everybody who accesses the internet really has to have some form of email address to access that service, be it on their device, a mobile phone, or their computer. And therefore, your email is a gateway to your life, and you will store lots of information. Now, if you have separate email addresses for separate elements of your life, that's fine. But the fundamental principle is you must have a separate password for each of those. Because if you don't, if people can compromise your email address because they have a weak password, they can gain access to everything else. So a strong separate password is really critical. The next thing is create a strong password using 3 random words. Up until about 18 months ago, it was complex passwords. People don't understand that. They don't want to know what that means. So 3 random words. So you could say anything, say binoculars, fan, carpet, or computer, radiator, sky, or something like that, and maybe put a character or number at the end of that and have some form of system. Then the next question is, well, how do you save these passwords? Well, you can save them in your browsers, provided you make sure your browser is kept up to date. And that also works into point 5 about updating of your devices. We'll talk about that in a minute. Or probably the best way to do it, and the least grief in terms of you trying to remember or create these passwords, is use a password manager. And there is information not on the CyberAware site about password managers, but on the National Cybersecurity website about password managers. Now, these are a piece of software which you purchase for a year on a retainer process, and it creates passwords for you for all your different areas of your online digital life. Clearly, the password to get into the password manager has got to be super secure, because if someone gains access to that, then obviously game over. So you must make sure that is critical there. The next element is turning on two-factor authentication. So whereby the password may be the moat to your castle, two-factor authentication is actually the walls that protect the keep of the castle. So it stops, if people have gained incursion into one element of your castle area, they can't go further in because they don't know the authenticated password, authentication to gain access to your password. And you can either do that through setting up online if you go to turn it on, and again in the notes for this presentation, which I'll share with you after the session's finished, I'll put all the information there about that, or you can use it through an app on your phone. The next element there is devices. It goes without saying that all your devices are like most cars. They need to run on an efficient engine. Your engine is your operating system for your device, and thereby it is no good having a iPhone 6 that you bought perhaps 4 years ago. It's operating on the same operating system. It probably started off at maybe iOS 10. Well, we're now operating at iOS 13.5. iOS 14, which is the operating system, comes out at the end of July. Clearly, you've got 4 years of all those updates and you've got no security element in there. Yesterday, the 1st of July 2020, Windows made out an announcement that they've put in a new security patch over and above their usual 2-week rolling platform of running out updates for devices. It's critical you do that. If any of the listeners at home are running either Windows XP or Windows 7 at home, I would suggest that they don't connect it to the internet ever again, because both those operating systems are now out of date. Windows XP, I think 2.5, 3 years ago. Windows 7, I think it was earlier this year, in January. They're not supported anymore. Unfortunately, they will still work, but I wouldn't connect them to the internet because they're not secure. And then finally, turning on backups. Regardless what we store, be it on our phone, on our tablet, on our devices, that information is critical to all of us because we want to remember certain elements there and they need to back it up. Well, how do you back it up? It's all well and good at having it on the device. What happens if the device is either lost, compromised, ransomed, and you don't pay the ransom and you never get the information back, or even if you do pay the ransom, you may not get the information back, and indeed you don't know if there's anything else wrong with your device because there will be malware on it. So your devices should be backed up either to a separate backup. If you're a company, you should have at least 3 backups. If you're an individual, I would suggest you at least have 1. You can back it up to the cloud, to your online cloud storage, but make sure that your device is not syncing information all the time to the backup, because if you do get malware on your device, it will be instantly updated to your cloud. So you need to have some sort of buffer, or you have a hard copy, such as a memory stick or a small portable drive, 500 gigabytes or a terabyte. They're all relatively cost effective. I think probably for a terabyte, about £50. And you just back up as and when you need to, because if you do get a problem, you can restore the backup. And if you are a company and you're listening, please make sure you do test your backups. So those are the 6 top tips there, but there are other sort of slides which I'll very quickly cover. Spotting the signs of ticket fraud, how to do that. Well, only buy tickets from the venue's box office. Now, I know at the minute there are no tickets being sold because none of these functions or these areas are operating, but that matters not. If you could be buying for something for next year, you need to think about it. NHS test and trace, I'll put a slide up there. The contact tracers will never ask you for this information, yet people are still being duped by people phoning them up saying they are purporting to come from the NHS, but they're asking for this information because the person is worried about COVID-19. They're just allowing all this information to go out. Please don't do that. If people start asking you for information, stop. If you want to report it to Action Fraud or to your local trading standards. And the other slide, just very briefly, next one over, is the suspicious emails. Up until April this year, you could report phishing emails to Action Fraud. That's now not the case. It's been taken over by the National Cybersecurity Centre. It's been up and running a couple of months. And I think they're nearly up to 1 million people have had reported suspicious emails. So if you get a suspicious email, as I did personally got last night, purported to come from a friend of mine, after I finish this and I finish work, I'm going to be uploading the content of that email to the reporting phishing service, because what they'll do, they'll end up taking that email address down. So those are the fundamental things, Sandeep, that people can do to reduce threat risk and harm to themselves.
So that was Mark, a Cyber Protect officer, sharing some useful information with you all. I hope you will apply these basic security recommendations to be safe and fraud-free. As always, if you found this video useful, please like it, share it, give us your feedback, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And I'll see you in the next video. Stay safe and virus-free.